So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Best-selling author Elinor Lipman will discuss her new romantic comedy, Every Tom, Dick, and Harry, in this installment of Author Hour in Massachusetts. So Elinor, who needs no introduction, is the award-winning author of 16 books of fiction and nonfiction, including The Inn at Lake Devine, Isabel's Bed, I Can't Complain, All Too Personal Essays, on Turpentine Lane, Rachel to the Rescue, and Miss Demeanor, which was a finalist for the Thurber Prize for American Humor. Her first novel, Then She Found Me, was adapted into a film directed by and starring Helen Hunt, with Bette Midler, Colin Firth, and Matthew Broderick. Elinor was the 2011-2012 Elizabeth Drew Professor of Creative Writing at Smith College and divides her time between Manhattan and the Hudson Valley. So, all 150 of us or so who are watching live, and the many more that will watch the recording, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Elinor for joining us here tonight. And Elinor, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you. This is pretty thrilling. You know, I'm born and raised in Lowell, so I not everybody, I'm noticing where people are from. And so I even saw somebody, did I see someone from Texas? But so also great. And I really appreciate your tuning in, especially at dinner time. So now Robert said I had prepared remarks. That made it sound like I wrote something and I'm going to read it to you. What I thought I would do is read the opening page of the new book, Painless. You know, not you've all had readings at your library where the author just keeps going and never stops. Yeah, we've all been to those readings. No, thank you. So what I'm going to do is read this story and then talk to you about, you know, starting it, what I had and where I thought I could go. My new business card reads, A State of Mind, and below, in italics, we empty your nest. Though I've been working alone since my parents retired, I've retained the we for sentimental reasons, and to sound less like the one-woman operation I hope to keep afloat. I've been estate sale adjacent since I could add and give change, spending weekends at a table, wrapping and bagging purchases. If buyers tried to negotiate, I'd point to the stated price on the tag and ask blankly, do you not want it? But the grown-up me has learned to be kinder and more psychiatric. I know when to handhold and when to hard sell. Some clients can tell a story about every item in their house if I let them. And sometimes I do. If anyone is convinced that the unsigned portrait over the fireplace is an old master, I don't argue. I let the small local auction house with which I have a relationship, I recommend them, they recommend me, be the bad guy. As ever, they agree that the work in question is either NSV, no sale value, or TFO, the frame only. So that is Emma, my protagonist and narrator, and she's 32, and I didn't know anything about Emma when I started this. I don't outline, so I get an idea. In this case, it was, wouldn't it be fun to write a book where someone had a estate sale company? And so I thought about that because I spend part of my time up in the Hudson Valley. And so if there's an estate sale, I try to go. And there had been a particular house where I loved the things I got, not big things. I didn't come away with, furniture, or grandfather clocks, but just a beautiful plate that was painted that I used for appetizers, and so a soup bowl, an appetizer bowl, and also a mug that was from, they had obviously donated to the Forward, which was started off as a Yiddish newspaper and became, now it's considered, a Jewish newspaper online. So I had been sort of having these thoughts, even though the woman was dead, the way people tend to be, when you go to their estate sales. But I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice if my character, my narrator, felt some connection, and I would explore that. And then that lasted about like 20 minutes, where I thought, what could I do that was new? Is it, what was it going to be? Some long lost relative, something discovered through 23andMe. So I quickly like drop that kind of romantic idea about the long lost somebody or the mystery of the past. And it wasn't quite my thing anyway, in terms of, my books, not really that thing. So I thought, I'm just going to have this 32-year-old woman who gets the reins of her parents' estate sale company. And they're so kind that they retire just to give her a job, because she's worked since college. She's worked some retail jobs and tried to get some more, a couple more degrees in writing, she hopes. And the fact that they retired at Buzzards Bay, I'll find out if anyone's from the Cape here. It's all sort of just kind of made up so that she gets to live in the family home. The mortgage is paid, and they retire a little early because they come back. You'll see them. They come back. So, I'm not sure if I should then read another little portion and talk about it, or maybe, unless somebody like raises their hand and asks, like, here's what we'd like you to talk about.
Elinor, keep doing what you're doing.
I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay, then I'm going to read a little section where the parents do turn over the. Thank you, Robert, for giving me guidance, because I never want to bore anybody to have to sit there and listen to me read. Okay, so her parents. Okay. Oh, and she calls her mother is actually her stepmother, because her mother died when she was 6. And that's kind of off the page. Sometimes I do the bad news kind of off the page, so I don't have to drag my readers through, unhappy times like that. So when Emma was 6, her father was widowed, and the lovely Beth, a neighbor, came over with a chocolate layer cake, and one thing led to another, and that's her stepmother. She was 8 when Beth became her stepmother. Beth and my dad announced with some ceremony at my 32nd birthday dinner that they were looking at a townhouse in Buzzards Bay. Winters are milder on the Cape, said my dad, and I might get a little dingy. I asked what looking at a townhouse meant. As a rental property? Can't be for summers, could it? Finders keepers, high season? Surely not a full-time move as in retirement? That's where you come in, Beth said, raising her champagne flute, the logical heir to the throne. They were asking at this shockingly early juncture, how would I like to take over? Finders keepers was mine if I wanted it. I didn't want it. I'd helped out because I had to. I wouldn't be good at wooing or charming clients. I wasn't vivacious Beth or genial John Paul. Who retires the second they turn 65? They were busy and healthy. Buzzards Bay, a dinghy. They were Harrowites to the core. Harrow is the name I've given this very thinly disguised Northampton, where I, lived a lot and taught at Smith. Let's see, I lost my place. Okay. You walk away from Finders. Isn't it your baby, your nest egg, I asked? Nest egg? No, said Beth. It was your college fund. It may seem out of the blue, but we've always loved the Cape. And my dad is telling me no more, and my back is telling me no more hoisting sofas onto people's trucks, said my dad. And no more Sunday nights leaving the property, air quotes, broom clean. I hope I never have to hear that expression again, said Beth. I said, what about me, though? I'd be going for broom clean. I'd be hosting sofas onto truck beds for people who should have brought along their beefy sons. So the parents then announce that even though they've given her the house and the mortgage has been paid, there are these expenses. So how about a boarder? And they, of course, have someone picked out, and they've talked to him. And who is it but Emma's former algebra teacher, who had been her father's best friend. They were co-teachers at Harrow High School. And so Frank has also been widowed, again, off the page. His very mean wife had been it was almost biblical. She was struck by lightning on the golf course. And that was the end of Ginger. And Frank is just this sweet man who was not only a high school math teacher, but he coached men and women, boys and girls, as they were called at the time, at Harrow High School. And he moves in. And if it's okay, I will read just the beginning of how that worked out. I knew almost immediately that landladyhood was working. On day one, Frank corrected the time on my coffee maker and programmed it to brew 4 cups at 6:30 every morning. He took the trash and recycling bins to the curb the first Wednesday he was in residence, noticed what needed tightening or oiling, and performed tasks unknown to me, such as emptying the crumbs collected at the bottom of the toaster. One evening, he came downstairs, found me watching The Bachelorette in the den, and said the Sox were losing by 10 runs in the 8th inning, too painful to watch. Did I have a minute? There was something important he wanted to discuss with me. I paused my show, surprising myself by feeling worried. Was our arrangement not working out? No, it was this. He was asking my permission to get something that had been unattainable when Ginger was alive. Could he get a dog? Unattainable? Why? I asked. Was she allergic? No, he said sadly. She didn't like dogs. She was afraid they'd shed and tie us down. I told him I'd always wanted a dog too. He said he'd go to the pound. Maybe there would be an older dog whose owner had died, fully trained. One day later, enter a squat little girl, part pit bull, part basset hound, brindled in brown and gold. She was orphaned, of indeterminate age, maybe 2, maybe 3 years old, guessed the vet, and instantly in love with Frank, and to a slightly less ecstatic degree, me. She'd been named Sad Eyes at the shelter, which Frank softened to a relatable long eye, Ivy. We placed one dog bed, a fleece-lined cave that looked like a pita pocket, in the kitchen, and another halfway between our 2 bedrooms. She stopped crying as soon as she was permitted sleepovers in Frank's room. So that's Ivy. I have a rescued, not myself, I have a rescued grand dog named Shirley. So, I based a lot of it on Shirley and how much I love Shirley. And my editor, Millicent Bennett at Harper, was at a reading I did last night at Barnes & Noble. And it's very unusual to have your editor raise his or her hand at a reading. But she said, I hope it's okay if I ask a question, but I want to know, what character did you have the most fun writing? So quickly I thought of Frank because he's so sweet and he stays nice. It's not as if I pull a fast one on you, But I said, well, Ivy, of course. And then I remembered Marcia Kirshner. And Marcia Kirshner's name, it was in an auction fundraiser I donated to for an organization called Foster Pride. And it raises money for kids who are in foster to do all these wonderful things. It's in New York, and go to special things and take them shopping. It's really wonderful. So I donated. My donation was the highest bidder for this donation would be I would put their name into my next novel. So my next novel happened to be Every Tom, Dick, and Harry. So the winner was Marcia Kirshner. So at some point, Emma needed to have an evening out and maybe, movie and a sushi. So I thought, well, that'll be Marcia Kirshner. I'll make that. She went to high school with Marcia Kirshner, who now teaches at the local college, which thinly disguised Smith, it's called Macmillan after a wonderful bookseller, Bruce McMillan, who died about 15 years ago. But I named Macmillan College after him several books ago. And anyway, he knew about.
So, Elinor, I think you froze on us about 15 seconds ago. I was hoping it was just me, but it looks like you've frozen for everyone. But let's hope she comes back. Oh, my goodness. Everything looks good on my end. Oh. So, Elinor, hopefully you can still hear us. It looks like you may have shut your camera off. Everything was going so smoothly, and everything worked in rehearsals, folks. Let me, boy, oh boy. Just hang tight, folks. My apologies. These things happen. Well, while we're paused, if folks have any comments or questions, now might be a good time to get them into the chat and into the Q&A. I think we were going to shortly transition to the audience Q&A anyway. So now would be a good time to get those in there. And while we wait for Elinor to come back on, and Elinor does have my cell phone number if Elinor is listening and needs to reach me. But as we wait for Elinor, I should note that tomorrow night we have one of the most popular thriller writers in the world joining us, Mark Greaney. He writes the Gray Man series, and he'll be talking about his latest book, Midnight Black. So he'll be with us tomorrow night, Thursday, February 27th at 7 o'clock. Mark Greaney, the author of the Gray Man thriller series, and he'll be talking about his new book, Midnight Black, which I believe is like the 17th book in the series. So he's been writing the series for quite a while. And then on Friday night, for any of you who are horror fans, we have Sam Rebeline, who is a Bram Stoker Award winner. He just published a short story collection of horror stories called The Poorly Made and Other Things. And so he'll be with us for a Fright Night this Friday, February 28th at 7 o'clock. He's very good. All right, so I believe Elinor has left the Zoom and is now trying to log in. So that's a positive sign. I'm going to say that's a positive sign. Okay, let's see here. Let's see if there's any questions for me. Do I have her phone number? Yes. So I will give her a call in just a minute. I want to see if she logs back in. Elinor, we are officially back.
I apologize to everybody. It just went, blank, but at least I remember what I was talking about. So I was talking about Marsha Kirshner, who I put in because of her being the high bidder in the auction to benefit Foster Pride. So I kept bringing her back, and eventually she became sort of Emma's wingman, and she would, show up at various receptions and things like that. And in the very end, which I won't give anything away, but she's the one that sort of suggests a way that Emma professionally could move on, and that is one of my happy endings, because I have several happy endings in this book, because that's what I do. I believe in happy endings. So speaking of happy endings, I might want to introduce Luke. And Luke shows up one morning. He is the chief of police in the town, and it's a small enough town, smaller than the real Northampton, because he is he chief of police and graduated from high school with Emma. So I'm going to read this introduction to Luke. Midweek, following a middling sale on Fairgrove, the doorbell startled me awake. Who'd be visiting at 8:30 a.m.? Hearing muted but companionable sounding exchanges, I knew that Frank was up and tending to it. A friend of his, I figured. No need to rush downstairs. I dressed, brushed teeth and hair, went downstairs and found a uniformed policeman seated at the kitchen table. Unsmiling, he half rose, nodded formally, sat down. As one of Harrow's 3 police officers, Luke Winooski was known by all. Everyone, including me, had gone to school with a Winooski sibling or cousin. But this wasn't the Luke I'd graduated with. Once a chubby redhead who played drums in the HHS orchestra and marching band, he'd returned from the police academy and a decade on the Worcester force, fit and nearly unrecognizable. So they wonder what he's there all about. And it turns out that they weren't supposed to be selling alcohol at the Moriartys. What alcohol, she asked. The spumante, said Frank. Luke added, and reportedly a bottle of peach wine. That's what brought you here, a bottle of peach wine? You need a license to sell alcohol, he said. Taking issue with sell, I explained how we practically gave it away. We designed groupings, maybe with wine glasses, a corkscrew, an apron. I'm sorry. Okay. And then anyway, so Frank doesn't arrest them, but this is sort of a little hint that we are maybe meeting a possible romantic hero with the book. So when I finish the book and I polish and polish and polish and really feel like it's done, I sent it to my editor, but I did worry that maybe the road was too smooth. The road to romance for Emma and Luke was too smooth. So my editor suggested that I slow it down in some way. And I didn't want to throw up some real roadblocks the way a 3-act movie does, where you meet, you get your hopes up for your characters, and then they break up, and then they get back together at the end. I didn't want to do that. So I created a 15th high school reunion committee that both Luke and Emma would be on, and they were sort of at arm's length. So I sort of slow it down that way. And then, of course, I had to create a whole, like, other members of the committee. So that's always more characters that I had to add. So I don't mind doing that either. So anyway, it's not too soon for questions. Does anyone have any questions before I keep going?
It's never too soon for questions, Elinor. So we have lots of questions already in the Q&A, so we can start those now.
Good. That's wonderful.
All right, here we go. So folks, I'm going to do the written questions first. And if we have time, I promise we're going to do some video questions as well. So first question, what were your favorite books as a child? And hey, what city did you grow up in?
Oh, I love this question. Grew up, born and raised Lowell, Massachusetts. Went to all public schools, including Lowell High School. I had absolutely favorite books. Okay, thank you very much. All-time favorite sort of kind of middle grade book that then I kept reading all through high school is Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster, an epistolary novel. The orphan who gets sent to college because she's sort of outgrown the orphanage. Love that dearly. I also I had an older cousin, my cousin Frida, who my sister and I got all of her books. So she was about 10 years older than we were. So we got Bobbsey twins, and we got of course, Nancy Drews. So I read, and when I loved books as a kid, and this actually extended into probably college, where I reread the books that I loved so much. Another favorite one was Two Little Women. Do you remember that series? These are so old. These are like the early 20th century. Two Little Women on a Holiday. Might have predicted my later life because the holiday happened in New York. So another favorite, and a little too old probably to be recommending to anybody in libraries, but these were I was passionate about that.
So, Elinor, you grew up in Lowell, went to public schools, and I do
Yes,
know that you also graduated from Simmons. We have another question.
yes.
Do you ever go back and visit your alma mater? And do you feel your journalism degree helped your writing career?
Yes, this is all true. But I had to respond because I saw Susan Lemire's, and she heard me say Fairgrove. And that is the Lemires, and her son is the wonderful Jonathan Lemire on MSNBC. I've been following him forever. I grew up with the Lemires, and they lived on Fairgrove. So, Susan, I saw that. Thank you. Yes, I do. I do a lot for Simmons. I mean, I have receptions in my apartment in New York for some classmates, or classmates surrounding that, and I taught at Simmons for just sort of a class here and a class there. I did that twice. But it's Simmons University now. It was Simmons College, and I loved it. I had a wonderful time there. And did I answer your full question about college?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
I studied at the time, it was called publications, never took a creative writing course. I was intimidated. It was like, it met at night, and they were really cool students, much cooler than I was. So I didn't do that. Plus, I wasn't creative writing yet.
So you did reference that you named the Smith College after a former publisher, but Diane wants to know: do you base any of your characters on people in your real life?
I don't. I'll tell you why. I wrote a story once because I knew I had a friend, and she was fascinating in the sense she was the most obsequious person I ever met. She literally, you'd meet her in the market and ask her how she was. She'd send you a thank you note. So this was kind of fascinating. And I was in a creative writing, fiction writing course at Brandeis Adult Ed that I started taking when I was 28. And I wrote this story, and I didn't have to worry about her seeing it because it was just for the class. And then that story got published, and it got published in Yankee Magazine, and she didn't see it. Then it got put into a Yankee Magazine anthology, and she still didn't see it. And then my first book was a short story collection by Viking with Stacy Schiff, famous biographer, Samuel Adams, Cleopatra, The Witches, all those books, and Pulitzer Prize winning. She wanted to put that story in the short story collection, and I said, well, I can't, because I really, I knew that person. And the lawyers at Viking said, but this is the most universal character in the whole book. Everybody knows somebody who apologizes too much, who brings unnecessary house presents and hostess gifts, and writes, overdoes it with thank you notes, although my feeling is you can't overdo it with thank you notes. So that went in, and my friend obligingly bought my story collection, and she saw this story and recognized herself, even though all I did was borrow her overly good manners. And she was very angry, and she sent me an invoice. I like that. Oh, so that was the end of me using real people. I mean, of course, I consult people, and there's in both Ms. Demeanor and in Tom, Dick, and Harry, there's a lot of art-related stuff. And that is luckily my Jonathan, my partner of almost a dozen years now, is an fine arts appraiser. And so it's, I've adopted a lot of that stuff, and it comes in very handy if you're writing about someone doing, estate sales.
Now, you had mentioned how you sometimes hold charity auctions, and people's names can be used as characters in the book. Barb thinks it's such a great idea and wants to know, when is the next auction?
There isn't something up like that now. I did it once for the animal rescue that my grand dog Shirley came from, and that was in a place in Brooklyn, and a very nice young man picked was the winner for his wife's name, and I forget, it was in Miss Demeanor, and I forget, it was like one drop too. Now, Anita Shreve, who's a very, very dear friend of mine, and another, anyway, miss her terribly. She once did this thing, an auction, and the people who won it, not only was their name hyphenated, but it was this very, it was a foreign name and complicated, sort of two Eastern European names. So what she did was put it on a sign at a hotel leading to a wedding. So it said, whatever the names were, like Smith Jones, only complicated, nuptials this way. So I thought that was exceedingly clever.
So you referenced your editor a little earlier on. Kimberly wants to know, did your literary agent, editor, or publisher make you edit something out of this novel that really hurt for you to take out? How did you deal with killing your darling?
Oh, good question. The answer is no. I added, because I'm a rather fierce editor of myself. So I, cut a little too much. So I added things here and there, especially having to do with Luke and Emma. But good question about, I don't usually have to kill my darlings, because I'm the first one to do that before it gets to them. And I know with, for example, on Turpentine Lane, my agent read it, of course, before it was, sent out to editors. And she said, the character is engaged to, of course, this one doesn't last because it's at the beginning of the book, never a good sign. So she said, you have to tell us a little bit more why she was even, like, why this guy had any appeal at all, why she was attracted to him. So that's the kind of thing I add, but it's a very, kill your darlings when I am editing on someone's behalf, usually an ex-student of mine who sends me something, then, I just want to start it later, get rid of the first page, because it's a lot of throat clearing, usually.
Gotcha. So Lauren says, I try not to buy many books since I have the Boston Public Library, but I own 7 of your books, Elinor, which puts you up there with Austen and Wharton. You're one of Lauren's favorite writers. And she wants to know, did you ever live in the Back Bay before you wrote The Inn at Lake Devine? And if so, where? I've always loved that book, and I often reread it because it's a fabulous story, and it reminds me of the more rugged Back Bay I moved to after college in the 80s.
Well, a little correction there. There's nothing that takes place. It's actually the two places. It's in Newton. The family lives in Newton Center, and I lived in Newton for sure. I lived in Newton. And then it all, it goes a little bit to the Catskills. And the Inn at Lake Devine itself is in Vermont. And my next book, which hasn't really been announced too much, but my next book is a sequel to the Inn at Lake Devine.
Wow, Elinor, we actually had lots of folks asking that question. I was going to leave that to the end, but that's big news. Speaking of next books, future books, Dottie wants to know, are you considering another book of poetry?
Oh, no, I am absolutely not. Because those were just political tweets that I did back in the day. I think at the first time I did it was Obama's running for his first term. So that had to be 2008. And then I did it for the next election when Obama ran against Romney. So, no, part of it is every morning I wake up and I do like spelling bee and letterboxed and Wordle and connections on the New York Times puzzle sites. And that was the time I used to get up and first thing and I'd write a tweet. But I sort of, that went on for about 5 years and that was enough. And that became Tweetland of Liberty that Beacon Press published in, I think, 2012, 2011, something like that.
Jennifer says you are the queen of dialogue. Is this a reflection of your personality? Do you enjoy engaging in banter?
I think I do. Yes. It's funny. I was a shy child and I was afraid to speak up in class. And, I outgrew that. Yes. I engage in banter. But the dialogue is the easiest part for me. And what I have to push myself to do is to, add a little bit of action. And I'm not talking big action. I'm not talking about, running a race. I'm talking about, I have to remind myself for the character, interrupt the dialogue by saying, picking up a glass or leaving the table and, getting a refill or whatever it needs to interrupt the dialogue, because the dialogue comes too easily for me. So also Stacy Schiff still reads every chapter that I write, and I read her chapters as well as she's writing them. But she will send it back and say to me, what is she wearing? Because I have to push myself to do that. What is she wearing? What is he wearing? Because I find that, isn't it enough to just mention, I don't know what, like a jean skirt and let the reader fill it in? I don't have to start at the top of the head and go all the way down. I don't do that.
Couple of newspaper questions. Sheila asks, I love your column about growing up on Cascade Ave, published on St. Patrick's Day in the Boston Globe from time to time. Will we see that again this year?
Wait, did they repeat that?
According to Sheila, they did.
Well, that's kind of great. Yes, I had a series. I think I was doing 6 op-ed pieces for the Boston Globe. And one of them would be published exactly on St. Patrick's Day. So I wrote about, we were the only Jewish family in our neighborhood, and that I always felt that we were accepted. And we're talking about, the 1950s. And so I name names, and I name almost all Irish Catholics in the neighborhood. And our best friends were the McGowans and the 3 McGowan girls. My sister's best friend was Patsy, and I'm still in touch with Carol McGowan Sullivan. So that was that story made it into my essay collection. Mm-hmm. And my sister reminded me of things like I was too young to remember this, but there was some priest, and he must have it must have been St. Margaret's, because that was the parish. All my friends went to catechism and church at St. Patrick's, but that priest preferred my mother's stuffed cabbage, the Jewish the Jewish corned beef, to the Irish corned beef. So my sister told me that he used to have that at our house instead of, some Irish corned beef. It's a little different color, as you know.
There we go. Ron notes that you mentioned the Forward, which I think is like a Jewish American newspaper. And Ron wants to know, have you ever written for the Forward?
I have. Now I have to remember what it was. It was a long time ago. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't remember what I wrote for the Forward. I did. No, I'm so sorry. It was a very long time ago. And in fact, I continue to subscribe to it. And, but there was I had a book a long time ago, and it was called A Bintel Brief. And what it was it had collected the sort of heartbreaking little ads that people put into the foreword. I wish I could say it in the foreword in Yiddish. And, it was just people looking, they came to the country and their husband came ahead of them and they were looking for their husband. And it was, it was a wonderful book. Not all sad, but I still have that book. It must be, that book must have been published 50 years ago.
Sure. An anonymous attendee asks, how long does the book writing process take for you from start to finish?
I would say the fastest has probably been 15 months, but that was probably after I was sort of on, it wasn't going well. And I might have, when I started over, so I might not have counted, I have thrown away 125 pages. I did that with Isabel's Bed, and I started over The View from Penthouse B because I had a character, a character was widowed, and in the course of writing the beginning, my husband died, and then I was a widow. So I went back and did it with a little more verisimilitude. Yeah, I did that. So, but I would say 15 to 18 months because I try to do 500 words a day. So that adds up. When I hear about people who take 20 years to write a novel, I don't get it. Why don't you just do, what is that, 1 word a day? Why don't you do, yeah.
Patricia wants to know, do you start the book knowing what the book will be about? Do you have an outline of the story? So I guess, the age-old question, are you a plotter or a pantser or some combination thereof?
Yes, a pantser for sure. Never have an outline. I'm not sure why. I think it's because an outline would seem to me a big job and a lot of time. So I start usually with an opening line and maybe a little bit of with this one, it was sort of Emma is going to have an estate sale company. And then, I didn't know her that well. And I thought, no, because I like to sort of help my characters who are a little lost. I like to sort of bring them, help them find themselves. Or sometimes like with Harriet Mahoney and Isabel's Bed, I had to send her to charm school a little bit, not literally, figuratively. So I just with Emma, it was wouldn't it be more interesting if she didn't want the reins of their parents' business? And so it's like Kurt Vonnegut said that when he writes, he feels like an armless, legless man with a crayon in his mouth. And that's how I feel a lot of the time. Like every day, it's like, what's next? What's next? And if I write a page and I consider it not going anywhere, not helpful, not moving the story along, I cut it.
So, Elinor, we've hit the 50-minute mark. So at this point, I want to get a little experiential here. So if anyone would like to ask a video question of Elinor,
that's nice.
Please raise your virtual hand. So I think folks should have the capability of raising their virtual hand. If they don't, I will try to fix that setting. But if anyone is brave enough and wants to appear on video and ask Elinor a question, I just need you to raise your virtual hand. And if you don't know how to raise your virtual hand, then I worry that things may go poorly. So there we go. We have someone raising their hand. So I know it can be done. So Stephen has his hand raised. So Stephen, I will come to you in a moment. Elinor, Nancy wanted you to know she doesn't live on Buzzards Bay, which was something you referenced about a half an hour ago. Yeah, but she lives in Onset, which is about 5 minutes.
I know all about it.
Okay.
I know all about it. Was there more to that question before
It wasn't a question, it was just a comment.
Because about onset, I hope you can still hear me. Last night, this very nice woman came to my reading at Barnes and Noble and bought 3 copies of the new book, and she had spent summers in Onset, and there was something about an Orthodox synagogue in Onset that it was less traffic, so nobody had to be in their car, and because this is Orthodox. So it was a long story that had to do with Onset and Orthodoxy, but that just happened last night. So now I know that Onset, I learned this just last night, that Onset is right next to Buzzards Bay.
So, Stephen, I invited you to be a panelist. You should have gotten an invitation. So if you do want to appear on screen, you'll need to accept that invitation. While we wait for that, I had several people in the chat ask me about the portrait of the woman on the wall behind you.
Yes.
Who is that?
Okay, it is a painting. Okay. Oh, okay. It's a painting that I had seen. I'm going to have to look up who. Wait, hold on. Oh, I can't see it. I had seen this painting at the Lady Lever Art Museum in Liverpool. And I so loved this painting that the aforementioned Jonathan took a picture of me, like, turning around with my mouth open, like, oh, I love this so much. So that was a visit a few years ago. So we went back to the Lady Lever, and in the gift shop for £10, I was able to get a print of it. So I very carefully, like all the way home, it was in my suitcase, framed it. And it was, the model was eventually married the painter. And I wish, okay, I'm going to text Jonathan and ask him, oh dear. He's right here. I'm going to text Jonathan and ask him the name of the painter. Okay. Hang on, everybody. Hang on.
Okay. I didn't mean it to be this difficult. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm going to say quick. Name of artist. Name of artist. My Lady Lever painting.
There we go. And Elinor, while you're doing that, Elaine, you had raised your hand, but you also declined my panelist invitation. So, folks, if you want to join, you raise your virtual hand, and I will send you I will promote you to panelist, but you have to accept it to appear on screen. So, Elinor, I'm going to continue to read questions from the Q&A until someone brave enough raises their hand and accepts my invitation. It sounds like you got a similar question last night at Barnes and Noble, but Elaine wants to know what is your favorite?
I've got the artist name is Brockhurst. Brockhurst. Very handy to have a boyfriend who's an art appraiser. Hi, Stephen. I can see you now. Yes, Brockhurst was the painter, and he's British. And this is in a prominent place in my house because just to print £10.
Sure. So, Stephen, thanks for accepting my invitation here. So you're going to want to unmute. That's the next step. And now, okay, so I'm going to spotlight you. And Stephen, thanks for joining us. And you can ask Elinor your question.
Okay, I'm not in San Francisco, by the way. That's just the background. My question is, how did you manage to find a publisher for humorous writing about politics?
Do you know this story? Do you know that moving forward, not Tweetland of Liberty, but my novel, Rachel to the Rescue, is about the narrator is someone who was fired on page 1 from the Trump White House. So that was my most political novel. And even, while I was writing it, my agent knew and my editor knew, and we can't wait to read it because there is something called the White House Office of Records Management, and what everyone's job was to tape back together what Donald Trump ripped everything up: memos, emails, documents. He couldn't help it. He just ripped it up. So that was her job. She got fired. So funny you should mention, because it was the only book that I got turned down, and the American publishers were saying that by the time it came out, which would have been like right after the 2020, no, right before the 2020 election, yeah, that there would be Trump fatigue. So it got published first in England, and like that, because I sent it to my English publisher, and he decided in like about a week that he wanted, it was late September, he wanted to bring out the digital book, the ebook, on October 16th, which I remember the date because it was my birthday, and coincidentally, and then the actual paperback soft cover on the American election day. So it all happened like that. And then it got published. Then it got published in the United States after that, a few months after. But that, yeah, I was, yeah. And so I think possibly, Rachel's day might still come. You never know, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Any other questions, Stephen?
How about that Sweet Land of Liberty, or Tweet's Land of Liberty?
Yes. Oh, I can tell you what happened about that getting published.
Yes.
I was at this wonderful conference they hold every year. Grub Street holds it in Boston. And I was there, and it was like sort of the cocktail party the first night. And I was talking with my best friends, and the publisher of Beacon Press came over to me and said, because she was following the tweets. No, they're not tweets. It was just on Facebook and Twitter at the time. But she came up to me at this party and said, is someone publishing these? And I said, no. And she said, well, I am. That was the easiest ever. She said, well, I am. And so I on the ride home, someone else driving, I called my agent and said, Beacon Press wants to make a book out of this. So it was just, she liked them and thought that, maybe people would buy them.
Well, Stephen, thank you for being brave. Thank you for being our guinea pig here. We appreciate that.
No, I wanted to ask Stephen, are you a librarian?
No, I'm not. I taught history and social sciences for 25 years in a good public suburban high school outside Boston, and for a few years German. And then I worked at Harvard Law School on the staff for a bit over 30 years, but I've been writing mostly humorous verses, mostly to old melodies since I was in high school. And I've never found a paying publisher for any of that stuff.
Oh, well, keep trying.
Okay. Don't give up, Stephen. Yeah. Thank you so much, Stephen. Really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to remove the spotlight and stop Stephen's video, but Stephen, you can still stick around. All right, so folks, if anyone wants to ask a question via video, we'll keep going for a few more minutes here. So Elinor, you got a similar question last night, but I think this is for all your writings, not just your most recent book. Elaine wants to know, what is your favorite character and what is your favorite book that you've written?
Oh, of course, we never answer that. Oh, I always say it's like favorite book has to be the new one, the new hardcover. Little public relations there. I can't really. I don't like to say, because I don't know if I have a favorite book. I might have said The Inn at Lake Devine, but I also feel about that doesn't need my help. That it's, Stacy Schiff, the wonderful person who reads all my stuff, when I told her that I was doing a sequel, then she said, well, that's a great idea, because that The Inn at Lake Devine was the gateway drug for your for your writing in terms of people, fans, and stuff like that. Most people think it's my first book. It wasn't. It was my fourth book, third novel, fourth. No, I've lost track. Yeah, fifth, I think. So, there's some books that I wish more people would read. One of them is On Turpentine Lane. I'm very, very fond of that. And what else? Yeah, no, I think some people think that the new book, I finish a book and I think, I've moaned and groaned throughout the writing. And then when these lovely things happen to it, I think, well, they must know better than I do.
So I don't even know if I should ask this. This could just be a joke. But Patricia Egan wants you to know that Jimmy Mulligan's sister Pat wants to say hello.
I know that is not a joke. And, I'm going to talk about Jimmy Mulligan. Yes, that's fabulous. Jimmy Mulligan, I went to high school with Jimmy Mulligan, and I knew him since about fourth grade. He is in, I would say, the last 5 of my books. If I've ever had a policeman, in this case, we've got Luke Winowski, the romantic hero of this book. Jimmy Mulligan, wait, let me read you the acknowledgement. I'm going to do that. I'm going to read you the Jimmy Mulligan acknowledgement. James E. Mulligan, former chief of police in Georgetown, Mass., and police commissioner in Rockport and Rowley, Mass., once again my indispensable cop on the narrative beat. Everything that Luke Winowski says and does as Harrow's chief of police was approved and often refined by my friend since fourth grade.
Wow. Okay. So,
yes, that is no joke question.
Elinor, I did read your book, but I skipped the foreword, so I have to admit. So I'm sorry I did that.
Oh, no, that was at the end. That was the acknowledgments at the end.
Oh, well, I guess I didn't read the acknowledgments either. Yes. So Lauren writes, so Lauren was the one who at the beginning mentioned Back Bay. Let me see.
Oh, yes, yes.
And she just wants to clarify that she was referencing Papagallo on Newberry Street.
He was. And I apologize. Newberry Street, Papagallo, for sure. Yes. I should
just want to clarify that. I didn't want you to lose your biggest fan there. And
thank you for telling me. Yes, Papagallo. And the interesting thing is, Papagallo was such a thing when I was in college that the fact that there's no more Papagallo stores is quite amazing. And with the sequel, I'm picking up where it left off. So it's not in the present because my characters would be my age and they'd be, grandparents. So I'm picking it up in 1974.
There we go. So, Elinor, we went about 5 minutes over, but we had about 5 minutes tech difficulties, so it all averages out.
I wanted to make up for that.
Yeah, so I think we did. Elinor, do you have any last words of wisdom for the audience before we wrap things up? Or is there anything I should have asked you that you wish I asked you that I didn't?
I can't think of, I would say this. Here's some words of wisdom about if you are thinking of writing. I started in a writing group, and it was at Brandeis Adult Ed. I mentioned that. And there was a teacher. And I would say that if you are in a peer group only, that you can bring in a lovely story or a chapter. And if there's not a teacher who maybe is a published author or an academic who teaches creative writing or literature, you can leave with your heart broken at somebody tore apart your story and they don't know any better than you do. So I would say if you're looking for a writing group, I always recommend not just peers, because there's always a loudmouth in your peer group who can really make you leave, on the verge of tears, discouraged, and it isn't right. It's not fair. So I think, if you can sign up for something where there's a teacher, a leader who really you can trust and believe.
So, folks, let's give Elinor a big virtual round of applause for a great conversation tonight. Elinor, you answered nearly 20 questions, so that was wonderful. And I do also want to give a big shout out to Stephen for being so brave to appear on camera and ask a question. So I want to thank the nearly 50 public libraries in Massachusetts for helping spread the word about tonight's event. I want to especially thank Wellesley Books, which has a large supply of Elinor's latest every Tom, Dick, and Harry in stock. And I will include a link to purchase a copy from Wellesley Books in the follow-up email tomorrow, as well as the recording and information about some other upcoming virtual author visits. For those watching live, please take the feedback survey that should pop up when you exit the Zoom. So, Elinor, you made my day, you made my night, you made my week, you made my month. It was an honor to get to do this with you. You're one of the best, and we really appreciate it.
Well, I hope I can come back for the next book because this was so much fun. And I feel terrible about, like, when it's edited, will you cut out the nothingness?
Yes, I will do my best.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
All right. Have a great one, Elinor. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.